Hi, welcome to video 1.4 Evidence for Evolution. In this video I'll be focusing on 5 types of evidence for evolution, including biogeography, fossils, mathematical models, anatomy, as well as molecular evidence. So let's begin. Biogeography is simply the fact that organisms seem to match the natural environments they're found in. The prefix bio means life and geography is a mapping out of the world. So living things are generally adapted and accustomed to the different ecosystems they live in. The classic example of this is the Galapagos tortoises, which Darwin studied on his visit there. He noticed that the islands that had more barren plant life, the tortoises would have longer necks, and the islands that had more lush plant life, those tortoises would have shorter necks because they didn't have to be able to reach as far to get their food. Now, fossils provide almost a timeline for evolution. And in my drawing here, you can see that we have a human on the surface of the Earth. And if you were to dig down looking for fossils, you would be going deeper and older into the rock. You'd be finding older fossils the deeper you went. So under the surface, you might find human fossils. A little bit deeper, you'd find mammal fossils. A little bit deeper, you might find reptilian fossils like dinosaur fossils. And even deeper still, you would find just marine fossils like fish. Continuing down, you might find marine invertebrates like a trilobite. And then the oldest fossils you're going to find are going to be single-celled unicellular organisms that lived in the oceans. Now what you won't find in the fossil evidence is you won't find any fossils out of place. So you're not going to dig down here and find human fossils back here because humans had not evolved yet. Now while we don't have a complete fossil record, we do have quite a bit of fossil evidence, and all of the fossil evidence we've collected so far seems to match up with this timeline, the timeline of evolution. The third type of evidence for evolution refers to mathematical models. These are typically done on a computer, but not always. And we'll talk more about these in class. We're going to do 2 simulations in class, one in the classroom and another one on computers. And we'll look later on at how mathematical models can be used as evidence for evolution. Some of the best evidence for evolution comes from anatomy. And in anatomy, we focus on embryology, homologous structures, and vestigial structures. Embryology refers to studying the embryos of different organisms, and theoretically, if the embryos look similar, that would indicate that those organisms are related. In fact, if you were to analyze or look at pig embryos, chicken embryos, monkey embryos, and human embryos, they would be almost indistinguishable from each other, and that would provide evidence that pigs, chickens, monkeys, and humans are all related, or at least they all descended from a common ancestor. Now the other side of anatomy, or one of the other aspects of anatomy, is homologous structures. Homologous structures are sometimes referred to as homologies, the prefix homo meaning the same. And this refers to the fact that in a variety of organisms, such as humans, alligators, whales, and batwings, you will see similar structures. The structure of a human arm looks like this. From the shoulder to the elbow you have 1 bone. From the elbow to the wrist you have 2 bones. It would be the ulna and the radius. You have a few bones in the wrist, and then you have 5 sets of fingers or phalanges. In an alligator leg, or the front leg, the arm of the alligator, you would find 1 bone, 2 bones, a few bones in the wrist, and 5 fingers. The same thing is true in a whale flipper. 1 bone, 2 bones, several bones in the wrist area, or what would be our wrist area, and then 5 fingers. And then a batwing, you see the same structure. 1 bone, 2 bones, and then 5 fingers. Now this is evidence that humans, alligators, whales, and bats all descended from a common ancestor, and the reason we have that similar structure is because of that descent from the common ancestor. Now obviously alligators don't use their legs or arms for the same thing that we use our arms for, and whales definitely don't. Their flippers are covered in a layer of blubber and skin. They use their front limbs for swimming. And then bats have a thin layer of skin surrounding their bone structure, and that provides wings. But all of these homologies have the same core concept of 1 bone, 2 bones, and then several bones. Lastly, vestigial structures are structures that are still retained in the organism but no longer serve a purpose. For example, goosebumps in a human no longer serve any evolutionary purpose, as well as the coccyx or the tailbone, as well as the appendix. Now the fact that we still have these structures indicates that we evolved from an ancestor that did use these structures. Goosebumps are used to raise up your body hair and make you look bigger in the face of a predator. Coccyx, our tailbone, indicates that we descended from an organism that had a tail. And the appendix indicates that we descended from an organism that ate a lot of wild foods that may not have been non-toxic. The last bit of evidence that I'm going to talk about is DNA and proteins, or molecular genetics, and this is the best type of evidence. If you want to understand if two organisms, like two animals like a human and a chimpanzee, are related, you could study their direct DNA sequences. Now in this case you can see that the DNA sequences are fairly similar, but here we have a difference, and here we have a difference, and here we have a difference. And those differences could come from a mutation. And so the more differences that you have, the more mutations have occurred over time, and the differences or the mutations are going to lead to speciation, which we'll talk about later. Instead of looking at straight DNA evidence, you could also look at amino acid sequences. For those of you that don't remember, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. So in a human, a typical protein might start with the amino acid leucine, and then proline, isoleucine, methionine, and asparagine. In a chimpanzee, you might have similar amino acids, leucine, proline, isoleucine, but then here you would have alanine instead. So this one difference here would indicate that humans and chimpanzees are closely related, but not genetically identical, and just a few DNA changes or DNA differences here would indicate that humans and chimpanzees are evolutionarily related. One of the genes that we're going to look at further and that gets studied a lot in terms of evolution is the cytochrome C gene. The cytochrome C gene codes for a protein called cytochrome C, and this is a protein found in mitochondria. All eukaryotes contain mitochondria, so I believe all eukaryotes contain this protein, and so it's a protein that you can study from one organism to the next, whether it's a plant, a fungus, a human being, or a worm. You can compare cytochrome C genes and determine just how similar two organisms are. So that's evidence for evolution. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Thank you.